Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is me, Sarali, and I'm here with you with one of the fascinating topic, and that's sometimes very tough for CSS and all level students. So let's talk about it clearly. This is our Islamic timeline because it disturbs students a lot. Islamic timeline is one of the major issue. This is one of the major issue for almost entire CSS and other community of all levels also. It's one of the toughest thing that people are usually they find themselves cracked in it and they're just kind of stuck there. So we need to resolve this out and let's understand how this all timeline begins and where it ends. And the important timeline for all levels of CSS is just that you need to start from the birth of the prophet and then you need to end it till like 680. I think it's very good and it's very comprehensive as well because all of your events are somehow driven from these dates. Your events are not somehow derived away from yourself, but they are all under this range. Like it all starts from 570 and you need to prepare till 680. That's very comfortable and it's very easy as well. Okay, there is no need to be worried about any problem and there is no sort of complexity because all these dates are aligned. And when we do it with events, then it becomes very easy for us to memorize this. How? For example, our date starts from 570. Okay, so 570, it's the date of birth of our Prophet, peace be upon him. Okay, he was born in Makkah in 570. And the other major event then comes. Just try to think. There are so many events. There are so many events. There is no doubt. But we need to understand this timeline quite differently. Like we need to go for the major dates. Another major dates comes 610. Here you see how much is difference. Like 70, 30 years from here, like almost 40 years later. Then comes the primary and the major date. And 610 is famous because of revelation to the Prophet. This was the year that the first revelation came on the Prophet, peace be upon him. The very first revelation comes in 610. That's why it's very important. Next, when revelation comes, revelation means Prophet goes to the goes to a place and then he reveals himself that I'm the prophet, and then official prophethood was started from that time. And then 613. Meanwhile, from 610 till 613, Prophet was keeping it a secret. Like he had openly talked about this, but he was not allowed to go outside and openly start preaching because once he announced this, after that he was stuck back to his home and he was not allowed to leave his home because the reaction of the people, it was kind of pathetic and people was very furious on him. So he kept it to himself, and then all those events which talk about the major instances, those are all the events where Prophet was still at his home. Okay, so he was with Hazrat, and this is all about 613 when finally prophets began for open preaching. Before this, so it's era of open preaching. Before this, he was keeping everything to himself. He was keeping it all secret, and though it was not a secret, but he was not going out for publicly calling people for Islam. So it was a kind of once you announce and then you sit back at your home, and because he did not had any instruction to go and start propagating again on these things because he was keeping it secret to himself. And then 613, and then comes 615. 615 things get so worst because finally Prophet came out and he started preaching, and once he started preaching, things started becoming very tough for him. Everybody started persecuting him, so it was getting very worse for him. So what happened then? 615, he finally gives some instructions to his followers that now it's time to migrate from here, because there was no instructions for jihad, there was no sort of instruction for fight back, and it was an age of patience. So Prophet finally instructs his companions that you are allowed to migrate. And finally, migration starts taking place. In first time in the history of Islam, that was a migration, first migration. And then comes our 616, second batch of migration. Numbers are different, leaders are different, companions are different, but the place remains the same, and the place remains as Ethiopia. So Ethiopia was the point where these Muslims were migrating. Okay, second migratory bed goes at 616. Then comes 617, and then it moves till 619. That year is boycott. In some books, it also comes that it started from 616, and some books also refers that 617. Okay, so it's okay with 616 also because it included 3 years. So that was a boycott for Hashmites. Okay, so in this time, like it was one of the worst time in Islamic history because the Prophet was limited and his companions they all were limited to a specific place, and they were not allowed to move from that point to any other point. So it was kind of limitations in movement, limitations in relations. That was a social boycott, that was economic boycott, and that was a boycott of everything. Nothing was allowed to be taken to the Muslim areas, and nothing was allowed to come from that areas. So some of the secret people they also helped them out because one of the prominent companions were also living. So of course relatives were there, and there was some support also available, but that was very limited. It was almost too limited. So we can say these were the one of the worst years of Islamic history. But then comes much worse than this. 690, the year that in Islamic history we know as the year of sorrow. Sorrow is something that we know, year of sadness. Why year of sadness? Because of one or two reasons prominent. The one is the death of the Prophet's uncle was Hazrat Abu Talib. He was the protector, he was the guardian. He was the one who was trying to guide him, and he was one of the prominent leaders. He had a voice, and that voice was actually protecting Prophet from so many disasters. Okay, and then was Hazrat Khatija also. She also died. So two figures, Hazrat Abu Talib and Hazrat Khatija, they both died because they both were badly disturbed in this boycott. They were complete. Their health was gone bad. Okay, so that was one of the a sort of catharsis, a sort of tragedy for Muslims to come out of that all. And Prophet was so sad, so that's why we call it year of sorrow. That was year of sorrow. Okay, then comes 600 620. Why is it important? Because 620 Prophet goes to Taif, and then so you can call it Taif. Journey of Taif, and we all are familiar with the journey of Taif, that what happened in Taif and how Prophet came back. But after losing the Prophet's uncle and his wife, Prophet was trying to find a shelter, and he was just trying to find a place where he could reside and he could preach freely the fundamentals of Islam. So he was trying to look at. So he found it out that maybe Taif can be a point where I can find a shelter, and maybe that might be a spot from where Islam is going to spread out into the world. But it was actually not the case. The Prophet couldn't get any support from there. Even he stayed there for many days, and then he turned back. Okay, and when he comes back, Allah makes another plan, and some people from Yasrib comes, and then Prophet meets them, and he took some pledges from them, and finally, to cut it short, 622. 622 is also very important because 622 Prophet finally migrates. The migration to the Medina, okay, that happens in 622. So the Prophet, along with his companions were already gone, so Prophet goes at the end with Hazrat Abu Bakr, and those famous stories that are linked with this event are also very prominent in Islamic literature. One of the important stories, you all might have gone through this, okay? So that all happened in 622. 622 is a pivotal point. From this is actually, that we see those all Madani surahs, they have different themes, they have different aspects. So that all starts from 622. Entirely the Quranic themes are changed, the fundamentals are changed, the instructions are changed, and finally the Islam that was before this, it was giving the lessons of patience, it was giving the themes which were very different, but now finally Islam comes to another way, and it decides the stone in different way, and finally the fundamentals of Islamic states are let down, but it all starts from 622. So we need to keep it in our mind. So video is getting longer. So inshallah we meet in next video. This timeline is extremely important for CSS or O levels, whatever you are doing. So keep in touch with the channel and also let me know about your comments. And of course, the chances of mistakes are everywhere. So guide me if there is any mistake. Thank you very much and subscribe to the channel.